Hey folks, how's it going? This is going to be a little bit of a heavier video than usual, so just kind of a fair warning up front that we go to some dark topics here, and it's not all celebratory stuff, unfortunately. Back in October of 2025, former Halo Studios art director Glenn Israel announced on his LinkedIn that he had left the company. And it was a very kind of ominous but vague message, the kind of message you leave when you are probably going to be involved in some like litigation, some back and forth with the company, and you want to be careful and kind of make it clear that this is like an adversarial situation, and you're not going to take things lying down, but also like being careful with his language and being careful with what he disclosed about, the Microsoft business and things like that. If you don't know, Microsoft has been sort of the prime technological enabler of the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza, providing the Israeli military with surveillance, basically like their whole technological footprint for military action with the Azure cloud computing services and AI and storage. And there have been reports of like, surveilling and storing all the Palestinian phone calls and things like that. Like Amnesty International, the United Nations, the BDS Movement, all these places have said, this is basically, a genocidal apartheid state, and Microsoft is a primary target for, asking consumers to boycott this tech company, including Xbox, including Game Pass, including the upcoming Halo campaign, Evolved remake. This is something I've had to wrestle with, on a personal level. I've been a Halo fan since for 25 years, for most of my life since Halo came out. And, when Campaign Evolved was officially announced, by that point, I was aware of the BDS movement. I was aware that Microsoft, was very much pushing this generative AI technology with its Copilot and all that crap. So, um, right away, the vibes were bad, and I immediately had the sense that this was going to be the first Halo product or first Halo game software that I would have no interest in ever playing. And it's been a weird thing for me as somebody who's played every Halo game and over the course of, like I said, most of my life. And I reached out to Glenn Israel back last year or early this year when he started posting on LinkedIn about some of this stuff. Basically, back in October of 25, I reached out and I said, "Hey, I sympathize with your situation. This sucks. Like everything that's been happening with, within the Halo camp is heartbreaking. The stuff with, the technology being used over for war and things, which is probably not new by any means, but we're just more aware of it than we've ever been. We have social media now, and things are just past the point of being able to deny them and sweep them under the rug and ignore them and play with our toys while families and hospitals are bombed, and all this horrible shit that's going on. And he seemed like a good guy who'd been through a lot. I told him if he wanted to do an interview, I would love to speak with him at some point. And more recently, he said that he would be comfortable doing an email interview back and forth. And so I sent him kind of the first 5 or 6 questions that were at the very top of my mind. Kind of the obvious heavy things that I wanted to, that were kind of gnawing at me. As somebody who, I know this Halo product is not something I'm going to give money to and probably never touch it or play it in any way. But I'm curious as like sort of a former games journalist who, I covered Halo for years and years, all the way back to, the beginning of my career. So I said, obviously, ODST era, Bungie, and 343 Industries were two fairly different studios. He began all the way back on like ODST, and then he worked at Bungie, 343, and then eventually Halo Studios briefly when they changed the moniker of the modern Halo studio. I said, what would you say are some of the biggest differences between Halo Studios in 2025 and, say, the days of Halo 5 or Infinite? Glenn says, I won't pretend that 343 Industries was a bed of roses, and I'm the first to admit that as a senior concept artist then, I did not necessarily have the insight into studio leadership that I gained after Halo Infinite's launch. I will say that the impression I had of the studio then was that despite their flaws, these were people who sincerely loved the franchise and wanted to do right by the audience. They just couldn't figure out how. I don't believe this is true of Halo Studios leadership. I cannot discuss the particulars of what Microsoft would consider the business, but I have personally seen and heard a level of financially motivated cynicism around the franchise and its developers that suggests to me Halo is regarded as little more than a stepping stone to personal aggrandizement, pursued at any cost. The politicking there now is simply shocking, which kind of echoes things I've heard about other Microsoft-owned studios in the last couple years, but I won't go into that here, but this sounds familiar, unfortunately. The cynicism that he's talking about, it kind of rings true when you hear about, like, just the reports of AI, heavy AI use and things like that, and just the state of things over there, right? Like, there's just, like, a lot of, studios closed, projects canceled. They care more about reviving the brand. I mean, we're seeing this now in a big way, under the new Xbox leadership, with they want it to be like, they're on our side. They're just gamers again. It's kind of like the Phil Spencer thing, except like in a speed running version where they're like posting Twitter polls and just trying to please like all the worst, most online people. But anyway, I said to Glenn, it was quite a shock when I saw the news break that you'd left the company. What were you feeling the day you packed up your things to go elsewhere? He says, that's a point of confusion I need to clear up. I did not resign. I was laid off in an act I believe to be plainly retaliatory. If you'll forgive me a brief digression, I filed my complaints against studio leadership in June, and these were met with hostility from the outset by Microsoft's Global Employee Relations, GER. I claimed whistleblower status on one of these issues and could not simply be fired. Washington is otherwise an at-will employment state. Halo Studios being located in like Redmond over by Seattle. So in July, he says, studio art director Chris Matthews unsuccessfully attempted, over the course of several days, to manufacture grounds for my termination. With studio head Pierre Hintz, then chief of staff Melissa Boone, executive producer Damon Kahn, and then GER supervisor Chris Malden complicit. It was then, in early August, the disastrous circumstances on our sister project, Halo Campaign Evolved, created an opportunity for studio leadership to temporarily reassign my project's team there, making my role appear redundant. So basically, a lot of, sort of art side people, art director, like people like Glenn and the art team are working on this multiplayer release. Presumably, we kind of assume that it's like a multiplayer based live service type title within Halo Studios. Those people are sort of put over, to assist with, the sister project Campaign Evolved. I asked some follow-up questions that I did not get answers to because, he doesn't want to like jeopardize like cross a line that gets him in trouble legally. You know, we could speculate about what that is. I know that we've heard a couple different studio names being thrown around as being attached to Campaign Evolved. We know that some of those studios have performed layoffs, just like Microsoft has, just like every tech and software and game company, has in the last few years has dealt with like layoffs and So probably a case of, who knows? I don't want to speculate too much, but it was a convenient way to make the Halo Studios in-house art people appear redundant by moving a lot of those people over to, an outsourced project, Campaign Evolved, and then laying some of them off. Conveniently, Glenn was, complaining about leadership, doing a lot of, shady hiring and promotional practices, politics, cronyism, favoritism, discrimination, things that I have heard of other Microsoft studios being guilty of. If at any point over those few months GER had taken action appropriate to the complaints and the subsequent retaliation, Israel says, I'd still be there. I'd given 17 years of my life to Halo and to a team of talented, hardworking, boots on the ground developers I believed in with every fiber of my being. That was taken from me for doing the right thing. The White House has used, okay, this is me. I said, the White House has used Master Chief and other Halo iconography in pro war memes on Twitter. The BDS movement has singled out Microsoft as a prime enabler of the ongoing genocide in Gaza. How does this stuff affect folks when you're there on the inside, meaning at Microsoft anywhere really? And this stuff is happening beyond your control? Israel says, many of these controversies did not occur until well after I was out of the office, so I can't speak to their effects on studio morale. I personally was horrified by the People Make Games expose on the topic and have since become a signatory to No Games for Genocide. I've also personally signed the No Games for Genocide pledge, saying that I wouldn't promote or cover modern Microsoft published games in sort of a normal, manner, and that I, would be clear about this stuff. This is the kind of thing that I would be doing if I talked about something like Halo Campaign Evolved, and that I wouldn't take like a sponsored stream from Microsoft or anything like that, as long as BDS names them a primary target of their boycott. I said, when some reporting came out saying that generative AI might play a big role in the production of Campaign Evolved, it broke my heart. Can you clarify Halo Studios' stance on the use of that technology or Microsoft's expectations of how it ought to be used for its first-party games? Meaning like, in circa 2025, 2026. Glenn Israel says, again, Halo Campaign Evolved was our sister project, and I can't speak to its day-to-day development in any meaningful way. I was present when studio leadership wrote and released a policy claiming that no generative AI would be used in creative endeavors where preserving a, quote, human spark, unquote, was preferable. But this was well over a year ago now, and I've heard since that individuals, at least, regularly use AI in ways I personally would discourage. I can't say whether that reflects a change in studio policy or not, Glenn says. So, who knows? Probably there's a lot of people using generative AI at Microsoft, a company that, whose primary investment and primary product right now is Copilot AI, large language model and image generation and all that stuff and data centers. So, you know, Israel is not 100% sure about the Campaign Evolved, with the extent of its use over there in other support studios and things like that. But it doesn't sound great. If AI is your primary concern about Halo Campaign Evolved, I would probably not be buying it. I'm certainly not going to be buying it. But for me, it's a case of several reasons that are really good to not support Microsoft right now. You've called for an investigation into Halo Studios' hiring procedures, I said, saying you've witnessed a lot of cronyism over the last couple years. What would you like to see change for the better now that you've spoken out? What's your ideal outcome? Israel says, all I've ever asked for is an actual investigation into the matters addressed in my original complaints. Microsoft has extensive and thorough guidance for fostering a healthy and productive workplace. I saw this guidance violated time and again to the personal and professional detriment of myself, my peers, and my reports, and I did what I was trained to do by reporting it through proper channels. It's now become clear, of course, that individuals and or organizations within Microsoft do not adhere to their own explicit standards, that they will punish those who do, and that they are incapable of policing themselves in these manners. A certified third party investigation is necessary if they want to preserve any sense of trust with their employees or their audience. And yeah, hopefully we'll get like a longer, more in depth interview with Glenn in the future when he's a little bit more comfortable doing so. The key takeaways here are that I felt very strongly that Halo Campaign Evolved was going to be the first Halo release that I would not be supporting. But things were vague. A lot of this reporting was kind of, you would have like a YouTuber saying one thing, and then you'd have a couple journalists saying, extrapolating from that and kind of editorializing. And then like other sort of Halo YouTubers would then kind of walk it back and say, oh no, this has all been taken out of context and it's not as bad as you think. And I think it's pretty bad. I think it's bad enough. I think that anybody who cares about issues of genocide, apartheid, generative AI, any of this stuff probably belongs nowhere near any of these first party Xbox games for the foreseeable future. I will, say that Microsoft has issued a statement about the BDS stuff, and basically they kind of said they weren't aware of the extent to which they were kind of enabling surveillance, and that they removed Israel's access to certain technological something or other on their side. Um, but it's like that's only one step of a multi-pronged issue, where basically that entire, genocidal campaign against a bunch of civilians mostly, um, I say mostly. It's essentially an open air prison. Um, the West Bank and the various like refugee settlements there that haven't been wiped off the face of the earth by bombs. These people are living in very poor conditions, and there are people in Microsoft protesting this. There are people at Microsoft who have been subject to a lot of like corporate retaliation against them and their jobs and things, for speaking out against this. And as kind of a lifelong, Halo fan, and a guy who grew up with the original Xbox and grew up with the Xbox 360 and grew up with the Xbox One and so on and so on. Um, yeah, this is something that I have been really wrestling with for a while. I'm a big fan of Fallout. I'm a big fan of the Elder Scrolls and all these games, and we have come to a place where I'm not cool with buying the new Forza Horizon game, and I'm a little bit. I have to ask like the people who do like how are you okay with all of these things that are going on right now? And it's so much piling on, and they're not asking for purity. They're not asking for perfection. The BDS movement asks you to consider canceling your Game Pass subscription. Consider not buying Forza or Call of Duty. Consider not buying Halo, and just like various things like that, right? And I haven't had Game Pass for a couple of years now, something like that. Um, you know, I bought Avowed last year. Loved that game. Was probably my favorite game of 2025. And I felt gross about it for all these reasons that I've just talked about. And it really sucks that studios like, Obsidian and Double Fine, all these great studios that make great games, including the Halo Infinite folks, like lots of brilliant people making lots of brilliant games. And it sucks that, they're caught up in this, but they are caught up in this. And, they have done a lot to protest and have a voice about this. And so I just say thank you, and I applaud the people who sort of within the machine have done what they can to make their voices heard. And obviously, some of this stuff is working. If Microsoft was willing to say, "Oh, we didn't know about all this stuff that Israel's doing with our surveillance, and we've taken away their access to certain, Microsoft Azure surveillance technology," and they've changed things. They've made a public statement acknowledging it. That means that this boycott, this protest, people speaking up about it, like, good for Glenn Israel for saying that he was pretty forthcoming with that No Games for Genocide, that he signed that, and he's seen the People Make Games video on it, which I will try to link that among much other further reading in the description for this video. This is not a fun video. This is some heavy stuff, and the sad thing is like a lot of the outlets that I have written for in the past, the IGNs and Kotakus and Rolling Stones, like all these places that cover games on a very mainstream stage, Game Informer, all these places, um, for various reasons, professional relationships, due to advertising placements, due to um, the IGN's parent company being very, you know, like pro Israel and things like that. There's not a lot of room for these people to just straight up say, "Hey, support the BDS movement, and we're not ever going to cover Xbox games." I'm in a position now where I can do this. I can use my voice, hopefully. So, um, yeah, it's not all fun and games right now in the Xbox sector of the industry, and just covering Forza Horizon 6 like nothing's going on is kind of a problem. It's bad. It's a little bit disheartening to see kind of the relative normalcy with which that release in particular has been treated. It's like a very big, I think Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4 is probably going to drop, and like a lot of these publications like IGN are just going to cover it like it's business as usual, and it's like not like, this company is basically aiding and abetting the systematic destruction of a people. I think the estimate last I knew was like 72,000 deaths in Gaza since in the last couple years. I don't know what else to say about it. I will also link to Glenn Israel's call for an investigation into the Halo Studios leadership and the things that he's mostly been talking about on LinkedIn as well. Look inward, folks. Look inward and ask yourself, what is the cost of some of our leisurely luxury items that we, enjoy while other people are losing loved ones and having their culture eradicated.